Well, folks, welcome to another Rockposer Chats. Joining me this time is a gentleman, I've got to admit, I'm a bit of a fan of his musical output, and that is none other than Mr. Jack J Hutchinson. Welcome to Rockposer Chats.
Nice to see you, mate. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing okay, mate. Thanks. Yourself?
Yeah, pretty good, yeah.
Busy as always, I see.
Well, yeah, I have been busy, but you know, it's all good, isn't it? Really, that's what you want. Really, you want to be doing lots of different things. So yeah, it's been a bit of a crazy couple of weeks, but yeah, all good.
So, did you enjoy your time over in Colonial Villa at Namm?
Yeah, it was the first time I'd been to Namm actually, so it was you know, it was quite an experience, slightly overwhelming actually, and you know, it was great to be able to perform in America, and I think it was good actually. The songs seemed to go down well. I'm not sure my sort of sarcasm and British humour went down as well as I'd wanted it to, but yeah, the actual shows were really good, and it was really cool to just hang out and go to Hollywood and hang out with some cool people. So it was fun.
Well, it's a tricky market over there. I mean, it's always been a tricky market, but it's even trickier, I think, because let's face it, most American acts prefer to come over to the UK and Europe to get even, a glimmer of exposure, which you'd expect them to get in the States, but just don't get anymore.
Yeah, I think what was interesting was the sort of music that I perhaps thought would go down well over there, which is the sort of southern rock stuff that I do. Yeah. But actually, they liked the more kind of Americana stuff, the slower, more ballady type music. So it was a really cool experience, and I'm hopefully going back again next year. So that'll be a lot of fun as well.
Well, of course, you're on Rockposer to talk about music, and that, of course, is the new EP, a new 4-track coming out, which has got the involvement none other than Kevin Shirley. How did you get Kevin involved?
Kevin did this post on, I think it was Instagram, probably about a year ago.
Right.
And I think it was due to him not being able to travel to the States to go and do some work over in LA. And so he got a couple of weeks free. And so he put this call out and said, unsigned artists, if you want me to mix any of your tunes, send stuff through, and, we'll see whether we can work together. So I think he was looking for about 8 or 9 acts to kind of work with. So I just sent him one of the songs, and then got an email back from him at sort of 3 a.m. saying I'd like to mix it. So then I emailed back and said, well, actually, could you do 4 songs rather than just the one? And yeah, it was really cool. I mean, I've been a massive fan of Kevin Shirley's for years, probably mainly to do with Iron Maiden, but also Zeppelin and Joe Bonamassa, loads of great artists that work with him. So to get him to kind of work on some of my music was just a bit of a dream come true, really. So I'm really pleased with it.
Well, I mean, one thing which obviously stands out on What Doesn't Kill You, which of course is the name of the 4-track EP, is you're another artist which people predominantly think of you as blues rock, is going a bit more towards the dark side, as I always say, like quite a few artists. I mean, certainly Chris Barrett has certainly got a lot heavier. The stuff on this is obviously a heavier slant on tracks people will be familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, it's never been an intentional thing to sort of do that. It's just that you write songs and you kind of, the way I do it is I tend to write tracks over the course of about a year, and then you sort of pick the best ones that you've been working on, and then that is your album. And so there's other stuff that I've written, I guess, during the production of the last record, The Hammer Falls, that is a little bit more bluesy and a bit more like my first couple of records. But what I wanted to do with the new set, and particularly with this EP, is I think my first couple of albums, you'd have sort of 2 southern rock tracks, then you'd have 2 blues songs, and it was a bit of a mix mash of different styles. So I wanted to make a more consistent body of work, which meant leaving certain tracks off the record that, I may record those at some stage in the future, but I wanted it to fit together in an appropriate way. But yeah.
I mean, I guess it's tricky fan-wise. I know regarding other artists, I mean, Ollie Brown being one, I know he got an awful lot of criticism when he started the Raven Eye stuff. A lot of blues fans felt let down. Why are you now doing this rock stuff? I mean, how have you felt reaction initially from people?
It's funny because I was aware of that, and it wasn't just Ollie. There's other people that I know that have got a bit of stick for not necessarily going down a rock route, but then sort of just changing styles. And they might have come at it from being an Americana artist, and then they've done a blues record. So it works in different ways. And I'd never really had that. I suppose most of the people that are into my music were quite open-minded. But yeah, when the new record came out, I actually got a couple of DMs on Facebook. One chap was like incensed, like he was really annoyed, and I thought it was such an odd thing, like if you don't like it, then don't listen to it. Go and listen to something else,
Yeah.
So it's not my problem if you don't like the material I've put out. But I think it's good. So good in terms of the songwriting. That's the main thing I focus on. Whether they're good songs and whether they are rock or blues or Americana or funk or whatever it might be. I think they're a good set of tracks.
I think some people get far too tied up with this whole genre business. I mean, you've probably seen some of my posts on Facebook. Some of the genres that come out now, I just cannot get my head around whatsoever. To me, there's two genres: music I like and music I don't particularly like. It is as simple as that.
I think a lot of people like to understand and have a kind of framework that they work within, right? So they get into a particular artist and they like to know what they're paying for when they buy an album. And so I kind of get it, when artists sort of change and you sort of have to go with it or move on to someone else. But I think it's better if it's just good music. I remember when I was first buying albums in the 90s, and it was like the stereotypical thing that when a band did their third record, it sucked because they basically spent 5 years working on the first album. Then they'd had to do the second album, which was kind of leftovers of what they were doing for the first album. Then they had to write a third album that was brand new music. And they got nothing to write about then because they were famous and they had no misery to write about. And it just sucked. And so it's better to just have more consistency across the span of your career, I think, whether it's blues or rock or whatever it might be.
Well, of course, going back to those times, I mean, I started buying music in the early 80s. Is you didn't have a choice about whether you're going to like it or not. You bought it without really knowing what you're going to get. There's not now where people can dip in and out, be it Spotify, YouTube, Bandcamp, or Facebook, or what have you. People can get generally a good idea about what to expect. Where before, it's pot luck to a degree, not with every artist, but certainly new ones.
I think the major thing I've experienced, really more so than the actual records, is, and this is a tricky thing to sort of word, but it's people who get frustrated if you move on from certain venues that you've played. And it's never a case of like turning your back on a venue or anything like that, because I value every experience. I value every gig that I've done, even the really shit gigs, right? The ones where you nearly had your teeth knocked out at the end of it. That's still experience for you as a creative professional. But some people really take it to heart if you haven't been back to play their venue for a year or whatever it might be. And so, I've always tried to be respectful of certain things, but if my new album is packed full of rock tunes, I can't go back and do a blues night because it's not going to be appropriate for it. So that's an odd thing that I've experienced, but you just have to kind of explain to people that no, I'm not up my own arse. I'm just moving on to different venues because that's what is appropriate for the sound that I'm doing at the moment.
But also it's a popularity thing, When people start out, they might have 20, 30 people in a small venue. They get popular. Suddenly they're going to have to book 500,000 people venues. You move on. You can't still be doing to 30 people anymore. And this it's also people. I think it's almost a British thing. We don't like people to be successful.
Yeah, it's a funny one. I remember when I first started out. Elbow, who I watched at Glastonbury this weekend, and I remember they were in like the Night and Day Cafe in Manchester, and it was really early on. I reckon I'd only probably been doing the singer-songwriter thing for about 6 months, and they were in there just hanging out. And I remember Guy Garvey chatted to me after my set and said, "Oh yeah, I dug that, man." And they were very kind of popular on that local scene. And then about 2 or 3 years later, they won the Mercury Music Prize. And loads of my friends that had been going to see Elbow kind of do those local shows sort of were like, "Oh, I'm not interested anymore because they're sold out." And you just think, well, that was sold out. They've just made a bloody good record that's very popular. So, you know, I just don't get it, you know.
The problems of being a musician.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that I've had the problem of winning the Mercury Music Prize, and I don't think I ever will. So, you know, I've got to take what I can right now.
One thing I wanted to chat to you about was obviously the dreaded COVID lockdown situation. You're one artist who I certainly mentioned to a lot of other musician friends who are not necessarily into the music you listen to, but just trying to get through that particular period of time, and saying, you know, look what you were doing then, the amount of stuff you release, like your lockdown specials, your one-off singles and all the rest of it. You seem to have really got your head around what needed to be done at that time, and you seem to have, you know, done far more than some people sort of sat back and just gave up isn't the right word, but just almost, you know, were despondent and didn't know what to do.
Yeah, I think that the lockdown period affected a lot of bands, and you know, you see it that a lot of the bands have kind of folded. I think one of the most tragic things in terms of music and the live music scene is those bands that actually did do a lot during lockdown, and they kind of got through that period. And then you're seeing them. I've seen numerous bands over the last 2 or 3 months calling it a day. So they've got through all of the chaos, and then they've hit the road. And you know, everybody knows that those sort of small to medium scale gigs are suffering at the moment. Everybody's going to Glastonbury and Download, but those ticket sales are just not there for the kind of local acts. So that for me is really, yeah, it's kind of disheartening actually. And I think some of those artists really did a lot during lockdown, where they were trying to. I'm talking about the people's whose attitude it was to just keep people entertained when everybody was stuck at home in lockdown. And they were working their bollocks off trying to, you know, keep people entertained. And it's such a shame that they're now coming out the other side of it, and they're stopping now. But some of these acts are, they're not as old as me, right? So they're young enough to kind of go through that phase, and then it maybe in 2 years they'll come back and form a new band or whatever, and get back on the road when things have settled down a bit. But in terms of the lockdown, I think I did a lot in that period because I, you know, when I'm not gigging, I find it affects my mental well-being. Actually, I really like playing, and the first couple of weeks of lockdown, I was suffering a bit, and it was a bit. I get claustrophobic a little bit, being at home for too long, and so it was a way of helping myself. I wanted to help other people, but it was keeping me sane, doing those weekly acoustic nights, and yeah, we did some live albums and live releases and things that were a lot of fun. So yeah, it was good. It was a really creative moment, but now we've kind of gone back to normal again, which actually is a little bit, you know, bit sad.
But you are someone who's grasped social media by the horns properly, because I still see not just established bands, but young bands still haven't got their head around the whole social media thing and how to engage with fans and new fans as well. You know, you can't just do one post and just hope that people will come to you. It's a never-ending push all the time across all the platforms. And I've said that to, you know, lots of young bands and acts myself. Say, look, you know, you just got to keep doing it and doing it and doing it and pushing it. You know, and don't get disheartened if you're not getting the feedback.
I think unless you're lucky enough to have a significant PR budget where you can hand that over to somebody else. You know, social media and learning how to use social media is really, really important for people. And I've given sort of behind the scenes advice sessions to bands who've got in touch with me, and it's quite nice to feel that you can kind of give some advice.
Yeah.
Whether it's good or not, I hope it's good. But you know, just in terms of stuff like you know, doing stuff like programming tweets, so you're not just on there all the time. You know, use something like TweetDeck where you can spend your Monday morning scheduling your content for the week that gives you something that is going out all the time. You know, you don't want to bombard people. I think I probably did do a bit of that in the lockdown period where I was just going like on Twitter all the time, and then I got you know, ticked off by a couple of groups on Facebook over certain, over posting content. So bands need to be careful about that. But actually, if you haven't got the budget, if you haven't got somebody who's granted you £20,000 to buy a top PR person, that is how you connect with people. I don't think you can solely rely on that, because I think what we're seeing at the moment with those local gigs is that you do need to have sort of, people that are within the vicinity of certain venues helping plug shows. And actually that kind of old system of flyering and putting posters up in venues is actually quite important again.
Yeah, need to come back.
But what I find really interesting at the moment is that there's all these different dynamic ways that artists can connect with people. And I put up a post last week about, and this was actually about somebody who'd somebody had sent me this quite sort of graphic pic on Facebook, and I was like, whoa, I'm not really into that. And I suppose it's like the opposite of a dick pic, right? It's like, let's maybe not go in there, but it's like you need to sort of draw a line with certain stuff. And actually sometimes people can be over familiar with social media, hopefully not to the extent that image was, but it's kind of like, it's a great way of fostering new fans, but don't give everything away on social media, because it's not so nice.
Well, you've got to have a level of professionalism at the end of the day. It's I suppose you've also got to decide, is it a hobby or is it actually a job? Is it actually your passion? I know it's probably harder now, because certainly you see a lot more in young bands where they've got young families, and those touring commitments are a lot harder.
Yeah, I think that I've always said this about the promo side of stuff, that if you want to be a kind of dynamic artist and you want to have a career, obviously the focus should be on playing your instrument, right? You need to be really good at that, and you need to be great at songwriting or whatever. But being able to communicate that you are an artist is really important as well.
Sure.
And so I used to play shows down at the Blues Bar in London, right? And so every week I'd be with these guitarists who were really great guitar players, way better than me, but they had no interest in promoting themselves and trying to get across their material, as though there was a fan base that was just going to discover them, and they were going to walk into that bar one day and suddenly they'd be famous. And actually a lot of them wanted to be famous but didn't want to do any form of promo. And right. I never got that. I was like, well, you're brilliant, but you don't let anyone know about it. You just expect the world to fall at your feet. And I think maybe that's actually an age thing, man. I feel like I'm slightly older now, I guess, than some of these new acts coming through, and some of them just expect it to be given to them. Whereas when I started playing music, which is sort of 23 years ago now, it's a long time ago, you really had to work your socks off to get any form of name or credibility or whatever. So that's where I'm coming from.
Certainly that period, the late 90s, I mean, that was tricky for a lot of bands. I mean, certainly from, I guess, one of the main genres that I listened to, hard rock. I mean, that really was, everyone had a severe kicking by that point.
Well, hard rock was uncool for a long period, but it was sort of a weird period where you'd got a lot of guitar music in the charts. So you had bands like the Manic Street Preachers and Oasis, obviously Blur, all guitar players, and that, and so when I was a teenager, that was what I saw. But actually, right, there was so many guitar bands where I was. I mean, that was something that I thought was really interesting about Namm when I was over there. There was a lot of musicians who were not of that kind of traditional guitar singer-songwriter background. And all you need to do is look at Glastonbury, the amount of people that were just singers with backing tracks, which I don't really get. It's not my sort of thing, but music has taken a bit of a weird turn for me. I still see myself as being a guy who sings and plays a guitar, but the world has sort of moved in a different direction. Yeah.
Speaking of directions, what's next up on your on the road of Jack Hutchinson? Regarding, obviously you're taking the EP out on tour, obviously, but what else is hidden away in the back pocket?
Yeah, so we're doing a tour in the latter part of this year. It's October, November, and then a couple of dates in December, which should be really cool. I've got Phil Wilson and Greg Smith, who previously played with Lawrence Jones and Sean Webster. They're joining me for that run, which is going to be great. And I'm going to play some new material on that run, and it's going to be a slightly different sort of show to what I've been doing, which should be cool, because I think it's good to kind of refresh the set each time. Otherwise, you've got people coming to shows and they're just seeing you say, play the same old stuff. But then I guess early next year, get in the studio, do some more recording. I'm not in a rush to make another record. I feel like I've had a 6-year period where I've just released album after album. I've done 4 solo records, and I've done a couple of albums with RHR. So it'd be good to just sort of take a bit of time over the next one and see where I'm at. I've got a lot of songs to tour with now, which is kind of cool. But and I'm also quite interested in doing a bit of co-writing with people. I've never really done that. I never really did it with Laz and Felipe. There was a couple of tracks on the Hammer Falls where it was great working with them on the World on Fire, which was a single that we wrote when we were in Brazil. But we never really followed that through with the album, and I think it would have been cooler to sort of work more together on that. But we'll see what happens with the next record. And I don't know, I might work with Laz and Felipe on the next record, and might work with other people. So there's lots to come, and I'm hoping to go back to America next April as well, so that'll be really cool as well.
I guess if you've got time to sort of sit back without a pressure of recording anything, I guess it might be interesting to see which way the songwriting goes, how much it changes, if it does change. But I'm guessing it probably would do.
Yeah, I mean, my plan was to not really write much this year. It was to focus on touring the album.
Right.
I've written a lot of songs recently that, as usual, there's a whole variety of different styles that I go through. I write a lot of stuff that's very kind of acoustic based and Americana based, and I've never really made a record that is like that. And that was what the Hammer Falls was supposed to be, but it ended up being the heaviest thing I've ever done. So you just got to go where the muse leads you, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's interesting. For me, songwriting is the real joy with all of this.
Right.
And so I spent a lot of time songwriting, and then I did Love Rocks festival this last weekend, and
that's great. The pictures and footage I saw online, it looked, I think myself and the Mem song will be tempted down there for next year.
Yeah, I mean, those guys put on such a lovely festival, and I was a last minute addition basically because Riders Creed unfortunately couldn't make it, so they rang me up at sort of 9:30 in the morning, hopped in the van with my acoustic and went and played some songs. But I played I Will Follow You, which is, for whatever reason, this went down really well in America recently. And to have people sing those words back to you that you wrote, you just write in your flat and you're writing it in your own little world, it's an amazing feeling. And so I don't think you get that necessarily if you're not a songwriter. You get different emotions and different adrenaline rushes, but it's an amazing thing when that happens, to feel that you've touched people in that way. So that's what you always sort of hope will happen with a song, but you can't write a song with the intention of that happening, otherwise it won't ever happen. So yeah.
Well, Jack, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on Rockposer Chats. As you know, fan of the music, top bloke. Looking forward to seeing what comes in the future.
Cool, man. I should point out that I haven't lost my hat. It's just over there. I just forgot to put it on before we started the interview.
I thought either that or he's got the camera so you can't quite see it, or the hat somehow shrunk into sort of a Stan Laurel size hat. Yeah,
man. It's like, it's the, however many albums in this is what happens. Everyone's I'm doing the Madonna thing where she changes the look from record
those
to record.
trademarks, those things you're known for. How dare he not wear the hat?
Next time we chat, man, I'm not gonna have a beard, and then after that I'll be completely bald, so it'll be a total different change of look.
Jack, it's always a pleasure.
Thanks, you too, mate. Thank you very much.